Well, welcome everybody to the second webinar in the series, Establishing a Collaborative Career in Academia, sponsored by the Pathways to Promotion Committee of the American Statistical Association Statistical Consulting Section. Today's webinar is on developing your first promotion packet as an academic collaborative statistician. So our plan for today is we'll have some quick introductory remarks. We'll get advice from our two speakers. We'll have a panel discussion to address questions from the audience that were submitted by the pre-webinar survey that was sent out, in addition to some questions that are submitted in the chat. And then we'll have some quick closing remarks. If Andrea Mack is here, she can tell us a little bit about the section on statistical consulting.
Christina, I'll jump in. I don't see Andrea. So this is Todd Coffey. I'm the chair of the Statistical Consulting Section in 2021. This is our normal slide that we have for all the webinars, but if you're not a member of the section on statistical consulting, or you're not aware of the benefits that the section provides, we encourage you to go to our website. It's recently been redesigned, and we have added a lot of new opportunities, including this Pathways to Promotion Committee, to not only advance your career, but also to be involved with the section and network. So a few of these, the benefits are all at the website, and if you want to go there and learn more about the section, please do so.
Great, thank you. So just some instructions for today. You can submit questions at any time during the presentation with the chat feature, and then we'll have the question and answer session following the panel discussion of the pre-submitted questions. So the Pathways to Promotion Committee has received a lot of comments and concerns and questions about the promotion process for collaborative academic statisticians. And as a person going through the process and a member of the Pathways to Promotion Committee, I definitely appreciate these concerns, and I'm excited to hear the speakers today. I did want to highlight for us some of the challenges that faculty that are in academic collaborative positions have described. And so the first is around conflicting messages. So when you're preparing your promotion packet, you have to divide your work into research, service, and teaching categories. And this helps you with your personal narrative, describe your professional history and career trajectory. Unfortunately, conflicting messages make it hard to know how to describe your research and how to categorize it. So I've listed a few of these messages here. The first is that collaborative research is not research. Research is methodological, independent, first author. The second alternative is that collaborative research is research. It adds to scientific knowledge. So when you think about describing your work, are both of these true or one of these true? Another message is that a lot of collaborative academic statisticians, they don't do formal teaching in a course. They're teaching us through mentoring. And so one message is that mentoring domain learners in statistical methods or beginning research is not teaching. Teaching is strictly within the field of statistics. The opposing message is that mentoring domain learners is teaching. It's helping learners gain new skills and knowledge. So how do we make sense of these conflicting messages when we're trying to put together our promotion packet? Other challenges are that there's no universal consensus on the evaluation criteria for team scientists. So how do we measure success in collaboration? For independent scientists, there's very clear metrics. Another challenge is that we need long-term planning for changes in effort distribution. Collaborative statisticians may find it difficult to reduce collaborative effort to, say, increase their time on independent research or teaching, when they start putting together their packet information. There's also fewer primary team scientist faculty compared to independent scientist faculty. And when you're an assistant professor, you receive a lot of advice from more senior faculty members, but what advice is appropriate given a team science bent to your research? Next, there's continuing tension between whether collaborative statisticians are technicians versus experts in their field of collaboration. So how do they demonstrate faculty level contributions? And lastly, some collaborative statisticians are in a unique role that makes evaluation difficult. They could be the only statistician in their department or the first among their peers to be evaluated. So I'm looking forward to hearing advice from our speakers. The first speaker is Dr. Leslie McClure, and she'll be introduced by Dr. Todd Coffey.
So it's my great privilege and pleasure to welcome and introduce Leslie McClure today. She is the professor and chair of the Department of Epidemiology and Biostatistics at Drexel University, and also she is the Associate Dean of Faculty Affairs in the School of Public Health. I think Leslie will talk a little bit about her pathway, but she received a bachelor's degree in mathematics from the University of Kansas. And I can tell you one thing that will bring a smile to her face is if you ask her about Rock Chalk Jayhawk. She also received a master's degree for the University of Iowa in preventive medicine and environmental health. We used to discuss that. And then a PhD in biostatistics from the University of Michigan. And that's where our paths crossed. I was a master's student while she was getting her PhD. Michigan had started a data coordinating center, and Leslie was sort of the lead graduate student involved in that, and I was helping her. And I think that year, Leslie, you probably did your work and mine, so I probably owe you some SAS programming hours in case you ever need those. Leslie's first academic appointment was at University of Alabama at Birmingham. She's done methodological research in randomized clinical trials, but has also done a lot of collaborative work, including being the principal investigator of data coordinating centers for studies, a big study with the CDC on diabetes, one at Drexel on autism, and then she was a senior statistician on a trial with on a big study with NASA. She is a fellow of the American Statistical Association, as well as the American Heart Association, the Epidemiology Council. I think what I would just like to say about Leslie is what I remember her at Michigan, and our paths really haven't crossed for about 20 years. But what I remember about her is that she was she included everybody, extremely inclusive. And it was just part of who she was. And it was just the kindness and goodness of her. There was probably 8 or 9 of us working for Dr. Brown, Morton Brown. And she made everybody feel like they belonged. And so I'm not at all surprised to see that she's an associate dean for faculty affairs, that her department at Drexel is very, very diverse. And I think that that she is a great advocate for all types of statisticians. So super excited to have her present today. Thank you, Leslie.
Thanks, Todd. That was such a nice introduction. I really appreciate it. And I might take you up on those programming hours at some point in time. So be careful what you ask for. So I'm going to share my screen here, and some of what Todd said, I'm going to reiterate just quickly. I want to start by saying, you can find me at Drexel. You can email me if you have questions after the webinar, or you can tweet at me at statgirl, LAM, or message me on Twitter if you have questions as well. So how did I get to where I am today? So as Todd mentioned, I went to the University of Kansas. I'm a big Jayhawk fan. They gave it a fair fight, three quarters of the way, beating Oklahoma yesterday, but blew it in the end, as I knew they would. And I got my bachelor's in math, and I actually became a math major because I was taking math classes for fun while I was trying to figure out what my major should be, and just decided if I kept taking math classes, I might as well major in math. And I found that I really enjoyed the classes like differential equations and probability that were really focused on the applications. And I really struggled and I shouldn't say hated, but really disliked the more theoretical classes. They seemed kind of pointless to me, I guess. And I don't mean that they are, but they felt that way to me. And part of that was probably the instruction, right? That I didn't have good professors who could help motivate the material. And when I was finishing my degree, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I wanted to be a teacher. And I thought that getting a PhD was how you got to be a teacher at the college level. I didn't really know it had anything to do with research. And so I went to the University of Iowa to get my master's in preventive medicine and environmental health. This was before they had a College of Public Health. And I went to Iowa solely because it was the closest place I could go to where my boyfriend, now husband of 25 years, was at the time. And so I really actually really liked the program at Michigan when I applied for my master's, but timing wasn't right. And so I did my master's at Iowa, and it was actually a really great experience because it did give me exposure to many more applications of biostatistics. So I got to see epidemiology in action and environmental health. And it really taught me that this was such a useful field that it motivated me to get my PhD. And so I went to the University of Michigan. I had an interesting experience there. And I like to talk about it because I like to normalize that it's okay to fail your qualifying exam. So I failed my qualifying exam on the first try. I failed the theory exam, and it sort of reinforced for me that I wasn't a theorist, and in the worst possible way, right? Like it actually, what I know now, all these years later, is it doesn't mean I can't do theory. It meant that I didn't do well on that exam that day. But it really, I think, helped set my path on being more applied. And, subsequently, of course, I passed it, went on. My mentor at Michigan, Dr. Brown, Morton Brown, as Todd mentioned, was one of the more applied faculty in the department. And I got to have a good perspective of what it was like to be an applied or collaborative statistician in a more theoretical department, and knew that when I left Michigan, I didn't want to be in a place that didn't value collaborative work equally with the theoretical. And so I went on to the University of Alabama at Birmingham, UAB, where I got to be a part of a growing group, a growing department that spent a lot of time focused on collaborative work. And I went there not only because I could be successful collaboratively, but also because there was a graduate program. So my other options wouldn't have given me the opportunity to continue to work with students. And remember, I wanted to get a PhD because I wanted to be a teacher. So it was really important to me to be in a place where I could teach. And I felt very fortunate to find a department that not only valued collaborative work, but also had a graduate program in biostatistics. So Todd mentioned I do some research and methodological research in clinical trials, but a lot of that is generated by the work my students do. And so I kind of keep a foot in the methodological world through my students, but I don't really do a lot of methodological work on my own, which is important because when you start to think about promotion and tenure, I want you to know that my first author publications don't go to JASA, don't go to biometrics, don't go to statistics and medicine. My first author publications go to like stroke and environmental health perspectives and occasionally clinical trials. And then they go to the audiences that the research is intended for. So I was at UAB. I came in 2004 as an assistant professor of biostatistics. 2009, I was promoted to associate professor of biostatistics. And 2013, I was promoted to professor. And again, all of these promotions were in a environment that really valued collaborative work. But it doesn't necessarily mean that that's what every statistician there does. And it doesn't also mean that there weren't challenges associated with that. And I think one of the important aspects that worked for me, and I think is really important, I think also Walter will reiterate this message, is that having a support of your chair or department head through this process is really, really important. And for me, that was essential to my success. Okay, and then in 2016, I came to Drexel, where we are a joint epidemiology and biostatistics department, and because of that, I think our biostatisticians tend to be a lot more collaborative, and our epidemiologists tend to appreciate methodology a little more. And we've tried to create an environment here where, again, collaboration is valued and not just valued, but celebrated. And so, again, we have people who are more methodological, but they're not developing theory, but they're developing methods in the context of collaborations, or they're strictly collaborative. And I've been successful with getting a couple people promoted. I have another one coming up in a year. So we'll see if we continue to be successful. Okay, so I don't want to spend too much time talking about me, but a lot more time talking about getting ready for promotion and some pointers for success before, Walter will do the same, and then we'll get to your questions. I think that, again, I had the benefit of seeing Walter's slides before I put mine together, and I tried to not overlap too much, but there are some messages I think it's important you hear over and over. And one is that every institution is different. So know what the guidelines are for your unit. Know early, don't wait till you're about to be promoted to start to look at those. Understand the process by which your promotion is approved. In my department, in my school, there's no departmental promotion committee. It goes directly to the school committee, and then it goes to the dean, and then it goes to the provost's council, which is comprised of deans from all of the schools and colleges in the institution. So each of those, there's implications, and somebody is going to be championing, being the champion of your promotion at each of those stages. So it's important to know who those people are. And it's important to understand the priorities at your institution. So, Drexel really prides itself on being a socially engaged institution. So if I can tie promotion to that institutional mission, then it's really helpful when it gets out of the school and people who aren't familiar with what biostatisticians do see it. Also, each of you is individual. And so it's important to know your strengths and weaknesses. And when you're getting ready to go up for promotion, it's really important to think about how to emphasize your strengths while either downplaying or addressing your weaknesses. And some of that should be coming clear to you as you go through this pre-promotion process, because you should be having regular check-ins or reviews with your chair or department head. And hopefully there's some sort of mid-process for this where you can get feedback from some committee. If that's not in place, you should ask for that. You can ask for feedback. Okay. Take advantage of any opportunities that come up that the promotion and tenure committee have for preparing for promotion. This is promotion and tenure committees change, and when they change, sometimes how they view things change. Values and mission change over time. So anytime that they do, like at Drexel, they'll do a seminar for junior faculty that's, getting ready for promotion, and they do it every year. When I was at UAB, I went every year before I got promoted because I wanted to make sure nothing had changed and the messages haven't changed. I'm not just saying this because I'm a department chair, but the most important person in your promotion process besides you is your department chair and your mentor. Help them have them help you identify who the champion is of your promotion case. Is it that person? Make sure they understand your strengths and weaknesses. You should not have any surprises from your department chair when you go up for promotion. You should know what they think your strengths and weaknesses are. So make sure you have conversations regularly with them as you get ready for promotion. Just like when you're looking for a job, it's not just like the day before you apply for jobs, you start looking for jobs. It's a process. This is a process as well. And then, of course, talk with others who have walked this path before you. Learn from their experiences, and they're great. They're a great resource to give you information, but also don't let them scare you, because every person is different and every situation is different. Okay, and I'm going to go through some highlights, but they're more specifics. If you have questions, please, I'm happy to answer them. Your tenure dossier is your opportunity to convince other people that you're qualified to be promoted and tenured. You are selling yourself. For many of us, particularly I think for those of us who work in a more collaborative role where we're often supporting other people's science, it's really challenging to do this. It's really difficult to say, hey, look how awesome I am. Look at the amazing things I've done. But you have to do this. You have to practice it. You have to get feedback. You don't want to be arrogant, but you have to say, look at the amazing things I've done. I'll tell you that as a letter writer, as a frequent letter writer for people's promotions, I look for what they say their strengths are, and then I say that those are their strengths. So make it easy for your letter writer. Say, here's what I'm really awesome at, and this is why I should be promoted. If you're concerned that others may not understand what the role of a collaborative statistician is, lay it out clearly for them. Say, I am a crucial part of the scientific process. Without my assistance, without my engagement, without my expertise, none of these papers could be published, or very few of these papers could be published. Make the argument that you are an essential part of science. Okay, some of the nitty gritty: adhere to the guidelines for your unit. You don't want something to get thrown out because you didn't have the right headers or something silly like that. And be very organized. Again, as a frequent letter writer for people's promotion, there's nothing I love more than a dossier that's very well organized and easy to navigate. Include, like, if you have a PDF, you can have a table of contents that have links in it or bookmarks that make for easy navigation. You can use tables or figures if you're talking about your research funding. You can put it in words, but if you've been very highly funded from external sources for the last 10 years, you can make a really pretty graph that shows that you've been 95% funded for 10 years, right? And that speaks volumes. If you're doing teaching, you can make tables that display your teaching evaluations if you want. And use, obviously you're all statisticians, you know how to make the data speak. Again, develop a clear and succinct introduction that describes the importance of a collaborative statistician in building a research program. Okay, even if you're a sole statistician in a radiology department, you're contributing to the research mission of that program. Without you, they would not be able to do the research they do. Okay, so I know this question came up in the pre-webinar survey. Highlight your contributions either through your statement or through an annotated CV. So I've received CVs from collaborative statisticians where under some of their primary publications, there will be a sentence or two that says, I designed the study that showed up in JAMA. And even though I'm the 5th author, there were four PIs that needed authorship ahead of me. But I was the primary statistician. I led whatever efforts. Again, brag, highlight your strengths. But it is okay. And I think Walter will talk a little bit about this too. I'm sure we've both seen different things. It is okay to highlight your contributions on specific items. I mentioned this already. Sometimes letter writers will borrow your language. So sell yourself, highlight your strengths. Okay, so I put some examples in here, and I think because some of the pre-webinar questions asked for specific examples. And so I say here, second, I have established myself as a collaborative statistician with focus primarily on stroke and asthma. Now, if you look at my CV and even for my promotion, my first promotion CV, I had a lot of different types of collaboration, but I had a lot of papers in stroke and asthma because I had good collaborators in that area. So I chose those to highlight to show that I was contributing to building a research program in specific fields. By using this twofold approach, I have successfully advanced my scholarship by collaborating on and publishing almost 30 peer-reviewed papers, by personally presenting 18 times at national meetings and assisting in over 40 presentations as a collaborative author. So again, I'm selling myself through the work that I've helped other people do. And then I say, I have included letters of support with respect to my research. And so if you can get some of your collaborators to chime in and say, this person's really great, that's important as well. And then I wanted to show that in my evidence of national research, I talk about, or my national reputation, I talk specifically about, I presented a talk to clinical researchers entitled Effective Collaboration with Statisticians. Okay, so again, this isn't a methods presentation, but this is a national conference for the American Thoracic Society, right? So this is an international meeting. So this is evidence of my national reputation. I was good enough that people, for some international conference wanted to hear what I had to say. And then when I summarize my research, I talk about my work as a contributing author. And I talk about second authorship being important. But I've worked with faculty to talk about, if second authorship wasn't given for whatever reason, to talk about why their their role in the paper was important. And I know I'm talking for too long, so I'm going to hurry it up a little bit more. But I wanted to talk about finding letter writers, and I'm going to talk really fast. Again, know the guidelines at your institution. Typically, they have letter writers have to be at arm's length. It's often confusing what that means, but by getting involved in professional organizations and seminars, committees, and other service opportunities, that will get your name out there for letter writers. And so, for instance, the section on statistical consulting, if you're not writing papers or collaborating with these folks scientifically, this is a great way to get other letter writers who are doing similar work to you. I think it's really important to keep a running list of people who might be good letter writers and be creative about it. So I talk a lot with faculty about finding letter writers. They don't all have to be department chairs or superstars. Typically, they only have to be at your rank or higher, and you want to look for letter writers who understand your role and your strengths. So when I went up for promotion, I think almost all of my letter writers were people who ran coordinating centers. They are not methodological statisticians, but they know what I do on a day-to-day basis. If you can, strategize with your chair about this. So I sit down with, I shouldn't say this because we're being recorded and this is against our rules, but I sit down with faculty and we talk about it, and they have to come up with a list and I come up with a list, but we kind of do it in a collaborative way. There are paths to success for collaborative and applied statisticians. Don't think that this is an insurmountable task. There are paths to success, but it's not easy, and it's important to take the long view of it. I also tell my mentees, it's always important to have fun. And if you're not having fun doing what you're doing, then you might want to rethink what you're doing. And if you're not going to get rewarded for what you're doing, then you might want to think about whether you're in the right place to be doing it. And then remember that we're our own biggest advocates. You have to, oh, this is too hard. You'll have to get these slides so that you can see the humor at the end here. But you're your biggest advocate. So make sure that you're talking to people, asking questions, and advocating for yourself. And I know I blew through that, but I want to make sure we have time for questions. I know Walter has some great things to say too. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Leslie. That was amazing. Okay. So on behalf of Heidi Spratt, I'll give the introduction for Dr. Walter Ambrosius. So Walter is a professor in the Department of Biostatistics and Data Science in the Division of Public Health Sciences at Wake Forest School of Medicine. His current work is primarily in coordinating centers. Most of this work has been in cardiovascular disease, exercise, aging, and inflammation. He has been the PI or co-I on several large federally funded studies, including Accord, Sprint, Compass, Life, Energize, and several ancillary studies. He is currently an MPI for Preventable, a 20,000 participant trial funded by NIA and PI of the DCC for the NHLBI funded PROVE study. His methodological work includes work in longitudinal data, study design, quality control, and genetic epidemiology. Since 2012, he has also had the honor to serve as the chair of the Department of Biostatistics and Data Science. They have many talented colleagues in statistics, engineering, applied mathematics, programming, project management, and administration. His department has a mix of projects led by their faculty and collaborations with people throughout Wake Forest School of Medicine and beyond. Walter was also elected an ASA Fellow in 2021, and I'm super excited to hear him present.
Oh, I need to unmute myself, I guess. One of the things that I think is always sort of interesting is learning what different people's career journeys were. And you know, I always thought when I was a kid that people planned their careers, but I think careers really evolve more than they're planned. You know, I started as an undergrad in 1987 at WashU. I knew early on I wanted to be a math major, and I was taking up more of the theoretical classes, and you know they were okay, but I didn't love them. But then I took Math 320, which is an Introduction to Statistics class, and it was by far the best teacher I have ever had, kindergarten through graduate school. And it was a really well-taught class. I was also taking an abstract linear algebra class at the time, and that stats class was much more fun. So I ended up taking all of the probability and stats classes, and then graduating in '91 with a math bachelor and a master in stats. I went to the University of Chicago for grad school, and it was more theoretical than my interests, and I knew that at the time. Part of the reason was my then fiance thought that she would have a better time of getting a job in Chicago than some of the other places that I was thinking about that were more college towns. And I think that, compromise is always good in relationships. We've now been married 30 years this summer. So it's good to compromise. While I was in Chicago, I had an internship at Searle. And they don't exist anymore. They got bought out by somebody that got bought out by somebody else. But I learned two things that summer. One is I didn't want to work in the pharmaceutical industry, and I didn't want to have a 45-minute commute one way on a good day. So those were good life lessons to learn. And then finished my PhD in '95 and moved to Indianapolis, where I took my first academic job. And that was in the Division of Biostats in the Department of Medicine at the Indiana University School of Medicine. And that was as a tenure track assistant professor. And most of my work was collaborative with some methods work. And in 2000, I submitted my tenure and promotion dossier. And I remember Friday afternoon, before these things were due on Monday, walking across campus and running into somebody else who told me that they hadn't even started pulling their dossier together. And this was somebody who was also planning to go up. And I remember thinking, that's just absolutely absurd. And I had spent, sort of long time, but really that entire week I'd done nothing else but try to organize that and polish but it was successful. And the P&T committee actually wanted to distribute mine as an example of one that was well organized. I'm not sure that it was the strongest dossier in terms of the science, but that's okay. But then I left right after being promoted for Indiana, and then took a tenure track associate professor job. So the tenure system with Wake was a little bit different then. They generally only gave that to full professors. And so I was promoted in 2009. In 2012, I became chair of the department. I actually asked the dean for tenure as part of my negotiation for chair. And the dean said, no, that was okay, because then a few months later, I earned tenure, and then I got a nice salary bump. We generally gave 8% salary bumps, but it was on the higher salary, so that was okay. But then for 3 years, from 15 to 18, I served on the Wake Forest Tenure and Promotion Committee. And I had always sort of assumed that all of these dossiers looked the same. And it was really eye-opening, to peer behind the Wizard of Oz's curtain and, realize how every pathway is different. There were people who were doing amazing things, but they were things that I never in a million years would have thought of a faculty member doing. Great work, but it was just really highlighted to me how different the pathways are. And that's something I think you all need to keep in mind as you're developing your dossier. You know what work you have done better than anybody else on earth, and you can be your best advocate. You can do that better than anybody else can. And it's really incumbent upon you to sell yourself and describe what it is you've been able to do that is amazing and is deserving of promotion and tenure. So a bunch of suggestions. So I guess I already just said this. But part of what I think you want to explain is why this is important. If you can't explain why it's important, why should anybody else care? And you know your strengths. You also know your weaknesses better than anyone. we tend, I think, to be more blind to our weaknesses than our strengths. But you definitely know those. I would strongly suggest managing your own CV. When I was at Indiana, I kept giving citations and papers to my assistant who was managing my CV. And I noticed one year at the annual review process that there were a few papers that had been left off. I don't quite know what happened. I don't want to blame that person, but I worked too hard for those not to get added to my CV. And so it doesn't take a lot of time to do. I actually have my own annual review tomorrow. And so yesterday I spent a bunch of time updating my CV, which I probably should do more often, but I only do every couple of months. But I throw things in a folder in Outlook. And so anytime there's something that I want to put in my CV, I just put it in that folder. And then, when it comes back, when it comes time to update them, I can go through them. And frankly, there was a paper there that I would have absolutely forgotten to add to my CV had I not had that reminder. It was one that was written probably 4 years ago and has just been taken forever to get published. So when you're developing your dossier, you are making a scientific argument. You understand grants. You understand making scientific arguments. You want to bring all of those tools to bear on your dossier to convince your reviewers that you are deserving of this promotion. You absolutely should be getting help from your department chair, from your senior colleagues, from peers that are a few years ahead of you, from friends at other institutions, and other groups. And remember that everybody really wants you to succeed. But other people are busy. They've got their own things to worry about, their own promotion, their own grants, their own papers, their own family life, their own issues. And so, it isn't, people aren't going to help unless you ask for help. But generally people will be happy to help. Wesley talked about this, but you absolutely have got to learn the local details. So at Indiana, the biggest hurdle was the Department of Medicine's P&T committee. Nobody in living memory had been denied a promotion at the school level and higher levels who had been positively recommended by the school committee. And they were proud of that, and they wanted to maintain that. So they had a high bar. So knowing that was helpful. But you also want to be thinking about the politics of who's going to be reviewing you. So, there were some candidate CVs who said, section on whatever, but didn't recognize that, the department level was actually the one doing the evaluation. And so you didn't really want to annoy the folks who were in some other section by not acknowledging that you were part of this larger collective. That person also had suggestions on organization and other more administrative details. Here at Wake, the Division of Public Health Sciences, in which my department resides, has a P&T committee. They review dossiers every fall for people who are not going up necessarily that year, maybe 3 to 4 years from going up, and provide informal advice. This is an incredible service. And lots of places have this sort of informal review. I mentioned nobody knows your strengths as well as you do. Well, it's sometimes hard for us to notice our weaknesses. And I don't know about you all, but I would much rather be told about a weakness than I had 3 years before I needed to have that fixed in my tenure dossier, than find out about it from the school's P&T committee that they thought that was a substantial weakness. And so that gives you an opportunity to try to address some of those. And occasionally, so you can actually ask for your dossier to go to the school without it being approved by the department or the division level. I will tell you that when sitting on the school committee, you see a dossier come through without a letter from the department's P&T committee, people are wondering what in the world is going on here, and those do not get reviewed well. They're treated very suspiciously. So the details will be different at your institution. You've got to learn the system. You know, find out who is involved, what are the rules, read the policies, seek clarification for anything that's unclear, reread the policies. Leslie mentioned going to the institutional sort of open house or discussions on the P&T process. We have those at Wake every year. You know, I highly recommend doing that. They generally don't change a lot from year to year, but sometimes there are substantial changes. And pay attention to what the deadlines are. You know, for us, it's always September 1. It's got to be into the dean's office if you're going to go up for promotion that year. And that doesn't change. You can ask for examples from successful colleagues. Generally, folks who went up a year or two ago are, you know, especially in your own department, are happy to share. And again, remember, your colleagues want you to succeed. You know, whenever we hire someone, you know, we are making at least $1 million commitment to that person in terms of, you know, the amount of effort we're putting in with you know, salaries and you know, the opportunity cost for not hiring somebody else. We want our junior colleagues to succeed, and that's important for all of us. Be organized. You make it easy for people to find the materials. If there's a standard format, use it. You know, not doing so is going to annoy the people who look at dozens of dossiers. You need to write and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite your statements. Then wait a few weeks and rewrite them again. Every time you look at it, you'll find something that was poorly worded or was too wordy. You can't do this the night before. This is something that's you know, it's a months long process. And be thinking about your weaknesses and what you can do to address them. On the reviewers, so you want to be really thoughtful about the reviewers, both the internal and the external. You don't have to have any one reviewer talk about all of your strengths, but collectively you want them to address all of the strengths. Leslie mentioned be thinking about who could write letters, keep lists. And you want people who are at least as senior as you. They don't have to be superstars, as Leslie said. They can be colleagues at other institutions. They don't have to be chairs. You know, usually you'll have only a few, if any, with whom you've published. And I think it's important, especially for collaborative statisticians, to have some letters from people you've collaborated with. You know, there are sometimes some rules on publication and you know, keeping people at arm's length. If you are allowed to have, let's say, 5 letters that are external, I have encouraged and I have asked for my own dossier to have some additional people who may be more familiar with my work and with whom I've collaborated. You know, you want to make sure that you have met whatever number of letters there are is required by your institution. But I've never heard of an institution that says, oh, well, we have some additional letters. We're going to throw those away and not pass those along to the P&T reviewers. Those letters can be extremely helpful. So, you know, in my cases, I had senior faculty, full professors at the 2 institutions who were writing some of these letters. You know, they were people I had published with, but, you know, I can't help but think that would have helped my tenure dossier. I have frequent small meetings with faculty trying to figure out who they can ask for these letter writers. So institutions have differing rules on whether you can contact people ahead of time. I strongly suggest you do this if you're able. You may not be able to contact them after you've submitted their names to the institution. But if you're thinking about asking somebody, ask. And if you can give them a list of bullet points that you would like them to address, I think that it makes it easier for them to write a strong letter. It also helps you to, especially if you do this with a number of letter writers, that you can have somebody addressing every aspect of your career that you would like to have reflected positively in a letter. Now, I never saw those letters, so I don't know exactly what, how they ended up, but I think that works fairly well. I think it also makes it easier for the letter writers. If I know that someone would like me to address A, B, C, and D, I can do that. I may not know about some other aspects of their career, but I can just say, I can make some general comments based on their CV, but then assume that other people will address those issues. Finally, you really have got to do what you love. So you've got to figure out something that you enjoy doing, and you will not succeed in this field long term if this is a drudgery. Know that no two careers are the same. Yours will be different than your colleague down the hall. Look for opportunities. So there are lots of opportunities to serve in NIH grant review, to serve in ASA study sections, to find interesting methods problems, to develop productive long-term collaboration. And you need to, this is not a race. It is not something that you can just, put your head down and work 24/7 and not have a life outside of this. You've got to work at a pace that you can sustain for decades. So take time for family, for friends, for travel, exercise, nature, etc. So I mentioned my Saturday morning therapy sessions. I absolutely love to go on bike rides, and I've got a group of friends that I go ride 45-ish miles most Saturday mornings. I'm really not kidding when I call that my Saturday morning therapy session. It really helps me to maintain focus the rest of the week. Keep in mind, it doesn't matter what you got done yesterday, last week, or even last month. You've got to be focused on the long-term goals and keep those in focus and keep moving towards those. There will be a lot of bumps in the road. Nobody's going to expect that there aren't. And a lot of this is just mindset. People ask me how I am. My two favorite answers are spectacular and stupendous, even if it's really not a spectacular or stupendous day. Try to forget the bad stuff, and you will get through this process. And finally, a little bit of humor. So I will close these slides, and then we can move towards answering questions and more dialogue.
Fantastic. Thank you. That was really great. And I so appreciate people who submitted their questions for the panelists through the pre-webinar survey, because I think they were mostly answered by our panelists. So thank you. I guess I just saw one question that maybe you could answer a little more. I know Leslie, you touched on it. What does it mean to be nationally and or internationally recognized when you're a collaborative statistician?
Yeah, I can elaborate a little more. So I try to, okay, so again, this can be institutionally specific, but I think being in a national organization in leadership roles is one way to show that you're nationally recognized, right? So leading a section for the ASA, or leading, if you're involved in a CTSA, getting involved in the bird group or the other, groups, but also you can be doing things on a national level for professional organizations, or giving talks at subject matter conferences that aren't necessarily statistical. So for instance, like I gave talks at the stroke conference, and I talked about some of the work I did with collaborators, or that was in our, we had to do a sample size re-estimation. And so I talked about that, but I was talking to neurologists, right? So I had to really think about how to frame my statistical speak, if you will. But all of those things, in my opinion, are part of your national or international reputation, that you're doing things that are showing that you're interacting with people outside of your institution, going and giving seminars, or getting invited to give seminars. Those are sorts of things that can show your national or international reputation. I don't know, Walter, do you have other thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, so NIH study sections is a great way to show that NIH is valuing your input. All of the things that Leslie said, volunteering for ASA, getting involved in ASA section leadership is a great way. And they're always looking for junior faculty who are interested in getting involved. Talks and we've sometimes, I've tried to set up invited talks for some of my colleagues. I have one colleague who's, essentially a single parent with a husband who lives overseas and had a really hard time going to conferences, but, was able to get her some invitations from other institutions to give talks. Work with your department chair. There are often places that where we're asked to give talks or more senior colleagues who could just as easily pass that invitation on to you if they know you're interested. And I think that's important for senior faculty to be doing.
And I'll just add that, remember, you control the narrative. So in your dossier, if you say, I have built my reputation nationally and internationally through these activities, then you're leading the reviewers to that conclusion, right?
Okay, great. I just wanted to acknowledge one chat comment from Eric Vance, a question about getting quotes from collaborators that you could put into your statements that go into your promotion packet. What do the panelists think about that approach?
I think it's good, but I would prefer to see those quotes in letters, just because, if it comes in the dossier as a quote that the candidate has been able to massage, it calls into question in a way that if it's coming as a letter directly to the promotion committee, that's, you're not questioning it. It's more work for the letter writer, obviously. But generally, these are people that want you to succeed anyway. And so, they've often invested in your career. You're investing in their career. It's good for both of you if you get promoted.
Right. Okay, I see another question in the chat, but I do want us to just finish out our slides. So let me do those real quick. I know the speakers have agreed to stay on for a couple extra minutes in the breakout rooms. So I wanted to just acknowledge all the people who worked really hard to put this webinar together, especially Margaret Stedman, who was the chair of this working group, and everyone really contributed. So thank you for your work. I wanted to mention there's 2 upcoming statistical consulting section events. The first is the Networking for Statisticians in Healthcare. That group meets bi-monthly, and the next meeting is on Thursday, November 11th, and you can email Rob Podolsky for more information. The other group is the Statistics Consulting Center Hangout, and they have bi-weekly meetings, and the next meeting is actually today at 4 p.m. Eastern, and you can email Clark Hogan for more information. And I see that Todd Coffey had put some of this information in the chat, but there's a stat special issue. Todd, I don't know if you want to take a couple
Just to build on what I put in the chat. So the section has been working on one of our major initiatives is a forum for collaborative statisticians to publish some of their innovative work. And so I would encourage you to go to this, the website that's listed here. It's in the chat. It is an online journal, Stat. And we have 2 broad categories that we're accepting submissions for. The submission portal opens November 1st, which is next Monday. So innovative application of statistical techniques and collaborative skill development. The bonus for this is that reviews happen in about 3 weeks. You get an accept, reject decision. So you really quickly, you can see if it would make this. The submission portal will be open for about 6 months. And you can reach out to Robin Ball or just myself, and I'll connect you with Robin for more information.
Great, thank you. I'm super excited about this special issue. Okay, next, so the Pathways to Promotion Committee is a subcommittee of the section on statistical consulting with a mission to develop recommendation and tools to help the advancement of collaborative academic statisticians. We're in the planning stages for a future webinar on negotiation skills. So if you're interested in joining the Pathways to Promotion Committee, please email Margaret Stedman. And your feedback is really important. Feedback from the last webinar and some of the surveys encourage us to have the topic for today's webinar. So please fill out the webinar evaluation. I think the link is in the chat already. And I really wanted to thank everybody for attending. I thought the panelists were great. There'll be an optional breakout rooms that are available to ask questions of the speakers in a smaller group setting. And please be on the lookout for upcoming events from the Pathways to Promotion Committee. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, we're happy to continue taking questions if people can stay on a few extra minutes. They're going to get lost in all the thank yous. Well, thank you to the organizers again for the invitation.
Yeah, we'll echo that. Thank you very much. It was, it's the kind of thing you think, oh, no, it's going to be a lot of work, but it's been a lot of fun pulling it together and thinking about it.
Yeah.
I think it's very much appreciated.